Hello and welcome to another episode of the GCSUNScast, the Gold Coast Suns show by fans for fans. I'm your host Shane, and tonight I'd like to thank our Patreon sponsors Dale Snelling, Jack's dad, Paul Vosti, Robbie Fiorini, Brody Burgess, Kate Kelland, Chris Moore, Tom Kim and Tim. You can join our Patreon donors and support the show by heading over to patreon.com/GCSUNScast. Check us out on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter or Spotify, wherever you like to get your podcasts from, and like, subscribe and review. But tonight we have a special guest, the guy that wears the sequin suits at Gold Coast Suns games, host of the Gold Coast Suns Inside 50 podcast, and has also been doing some stints lately on ABC local radio, giving a match report. Welcome to the show, Jason Churchill.
Good evening, Shane. How are you, buddy?
Good. So, let's see.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you're welcome. It's great to chat to you. I've listened to your Inside 50 podcast last year when it came out, and
oh, good. Someone has. That's great news.
I was quite impressed and very, let's just say, envious that I wasn't interviewing some of the Suns people you were, such as Mark Evans and John Haynes, Stuart Dew. So
yes,
I'm sure
I was very fortunate. Yes,
I'm sure you've got some great stories for us. But
I do.
First, let's get to know you a bit better. So you coach junior footy here on the Gold Coast. You go to Suns games since day one, and you've been wearing sequin suits, so brightly coloured, shiny suits to, I guess, show your support and give a bit of attention.
Indeed. Oh, well, I'm a passionate AFL supporter. Obviously, Gold Coast Suns supporter. I'm a Gold Coast Suns or Gold Coast local, and absolutely stoked that the Gold Coast got their own AFL license back in 2009. I think it was granted, and then the last, obviously, this is our 10th year, and away we go. We're on the up and up. The Suns, which is fantastic, but when you're out at the footy, why not dress up? It saves me wearing it around the house because I'm not allowed to.
So you've obviously got a lot of attention from wearing these suits. The club's approached you about doing this Inside 50 podcast, and you get recognised pretty much wherever you go, it sounds like it.
Yeah, it's been, I guess, a part of it. I've spoken to a number of people over the journey, and on the back of wearing the suit, because it's an icebreaker. So it's something a bit different. I did it in my previous business life and my career I had for 20 odd years as a financial advisor, and it worked beautifully there in that industry where it was. Wearing something different was quite memorable. It would evoke a reaction in some way, shape or form, and I guess just wearing it. It's not the main purpose and not the reason for wearing it to the footy. I just want to dress up as brightly as I can and be as loud and as passionate as I possibly can to support my local team. And if you end up getting a few benefits on the back of it because you do become known, and they go, okay, he's not a bad dude. He knows his footy. He's passionate. Let's see how he goes. And I guess that's how the opportunity arose at beginning of last year, beginning of 2019, with being asked to be the host of the Inside 50 podcast, which is obviously internally done by the football club, which was an honour and a privilege. And unfortunately, can't do it this year for obvious reasons with COVID-19 and the very, very strong and firm restrictions that have been put on the footy club and the AFL as a whole, or the AFL have brought down, which is obviously has to be done, and it's not a bad thing, but unfortunately things do fall by the wayside, and Inside 50 for this football season has been pushed aside for that reason. I can't be inside the club, and I can't do face-to-face interviews with, as you mentioned, the likes of Mark Evans and John Haynes and Stuart Dew and some of the players, which, as I said, was a privilege, and it was fantastic to be able to do that last year.
Yeah, it's a real shame. But you found yourself helping out ABC local radio lately, doing the Monday Match Report. How's that going?
Yeah, that's really good. That absolutely came out of the blue. I happened to remember back in round 2, or just prior to round 2 finally getting up and running, there was a distinct chance that Anastasia Palaszczuk was going to allow, and the club had applied, and the Lions had applied as well, for like 500 or 1,000 people to be allowed to go to the first game. So on the Monday, ABC Gold Coast had it as a talkback section on the air and said, please ring in and let us know if you would go, basically, if the restrictions are lifted, which ultimately the next day they weren't. They were the following week. But on the Monday they said, ring up and let us know if they are lifted tomorrow. Would you go to the footy? And I just picked up the phone and rang, and honestly, it's the first time I've ever phoned in on ABC. And it was just a very random conversation about, I'm a foundation member and I'm passionate and so on and so forth. And we had a bit of a chat and said I would definitely go if it was lifted. Obviously, it was lifted the following week, and I've been to the games, which has been fantastic. But they ended up asking for my number and kept it and said, you seem to know your stuff. Do you mind if we maybe give you a call one day to have a bit more of a chat about the Suns? And it has now become a regular weekly thing with Matt Webber ringing me the morning after the previous night's game. So normally 8:30 on a Monday morning, I'm on 91.7 FM giving a 5 or 10 minute match report on how the Suns went, and most of the time it's been pretty good because we're 4-4 and on the up.
Yeah, a lot of positive news to talk about this year, so I imagine it's been a pretty easy job. Yeah,
it has. Yeah, we've got good material this year, that's for sure. It wasn't that easy on Inside 50 last year when ultimately we had 18 losses in a row. So the start of the season was okay because we won 3 of our first 4, but as the season went on, with a number of injuries and obviously the victories not coming our way, it was a bit of a slog. But just on that, the likes of Mark Evans and John Haynes and Stuart Dew and even the players and all the staff, the positivity around a club that is losing several games in a row at the time, and then they lose again, and then another couple, and I go in 2 weeks later towards the end of the season, and they're 14, 15, 16 in a row they've lost, and it was like it was still round 5 or 6. There was obviously concern, and they'd love better on-field performances, and they'd like a shorter injury list as it was last season, but the positivity and everyone, I guess, rowing in the same direction and having a big picture view of the club, of the players, of who was going to stay, who was not going to stay, who they're looking at recruiting, so on and so forth. This is all this time last year, so July, August last year, and here we are 11 months down the track, and it's absolutely bearing fruit. Everyone can see it. The AFL, the whole competition can see it. We could have easily been 5-3. Maybe even 6-2 if we got our kicking boots on and a bit more work around the ball against Melbourne. That was a winnable game as well. So yeah, we've come a hell of a long way in such a short period of time. But internally, the confidence has been there, and the process has been there, and the coaching and the support and everything has been there. So it's a great time to be a Suns fan. In all fairness.
It is a great time. I'm having so much fun watching Suns games, and it's something that I've done over the last few years, but I haven't enjoyed it anywhere near as much as what I have this year, and I'm sure you're the same.
100%, yeah. Oh, the just watching the enjoyment. What I enjoy the most is watching other players celebrate someone kicking a goal. So it was the game against, I think, Adelaide, and I was watching a bit of work that Will Powell did on the half-forward flank, which was a pressure act. He didn't touch the ball. It was a pressure act. The ball went forward. We kicked a goal. He lined back up on the wing on the western side of the ground. On the eastern side of the ground, Brandon Ellis was on the other wing, and I was on centre wing up on the second level and watching across the ground. And the acknowledgement that Brandon Ellis gave Will Powell with clapping above his head and pointing to him, and Will was clapping him back to acknowledge it. That's the sort of stuff that wins finals and wins premierships, because the camaraderie and the teamwork is what it's all about. When you're talking about a list of 40-odd players, it can be so easily disjointed with so many different people and so many different personalities. But the one thing, having been part of or brushing shoulders, I guess, a little bit with the inner sanctum in my experience and my little bit of experience in doing Inside 50 last year and being around the club as a foundation member since day dot and what have you, is it's second to none over the last sort of 18 months compared to where it was previously. But I think also in comparison to the rest of the competition, because they've reset big time, and it's absolutely working. And I just enjoy watching the team celebrate a goal, not an individual. Obviously, we've got some amazing individuals, and someone like Isaac Rankin is going to light up the highlights reel more than most. He's Andrew McLeod rolled into Cyril Rioli, I think, and look out, we've got exciting times ahead with that one player. But how other players talk about him and how he actually talks about other players as well is fantastic. So it's such a team environment, and that's the most exciting part, where it doesn't matter who kicks the goal, it doesn't matter who lays that crucial tackle. It's the Suns. And that's Hawthorn-like in their three-peat. That's Brisbane Lions-like in their three-peat. So not to say that the Suns are going to have a three-peat. A finals appearance would be lovely over the next, maybe this year. Oh, it's a big maybe, but it's a maybe. We're in it. But certainly next year, I'd like to think that we're playing finals next season, 2021, and anything can happen from there. But the signs are there where you saw the Geelong era sort of start in the mid-noughties. You saw, and obviously they had some great clashes with Hawthorn for a decade. You can just see the Suns, the birth of the Suns over the last sort of 12, 18 months. And this season is really exciting to watch, because it's really coming together on the field. But off field, it's been coming together for a couple of years, and you've got to build that foundation first, and they've done it.
Yep. You also, I know that you're a North Melbourne supporter as well. I believe you're
yes.
paid upfront member this year as well.
Yes, I am.
Yep.
I've been on the membership card, it's got 20 years consecutive member, and I don't want to let that go. Despite not getting to, I think I've been to maybe 2 North Melbourne games in the last 4 years.
So I want to know.
Go on.
I want to know, who do you support when the Suns play North Melbourne? Like, is it a hard decision for you?
It is. It has been a hard decision for me, and any of my mates who know how passionate I've been about the Kangas since the 90s in particular will probably not believe it, but the Suns are my number one team now, and that's probably been a transition period over the last couple of years.
So it was
in the past, I would actually. Sorry, Shane. Yeah,
it was gradual.
I would go for whoever's on top. So let's say that North are 9th and the Suns are 15th, and North have got to win to make the 8. I'd go for North. So whichever team's going to benefit more from the victory, I was torn for probably 5 seasons. Now I find myself going for the Suns the last couple of times we played North Melbourne. So without a shadow of a doubt, and I've sort of been cranky when North have kicked a goal. So that's the first time I can say that in my life. So there you go. It's taken a while, but the best part of sort of 8 or 9 seasons of watching the Suns very closely, and I I can still say I've got two teams, and when North are playing anybody else, I'm watching intently. But when the Suns play North, I'm now going for the mighty Gold Coast Suns, which is fantastic.
Okay, so yeah, it took you about 5 years. I think it only took me 2 years. Being who
did you support, Shane?
I was a former Adelaide supporter. So
wow.
I supported the Crows.
Yes.
However, the Suns came into the comp, and obviously being a Gold Coaster at this stage, I was all on board the Gold Coast train. But I think the first time we played Adelaide, I wasn't expecting much. I figured Adelaide would win anyway, but I was still excited to see the Suns' development. But the next year, I think when we had played Adelaide, I think the Suns had shown a bit more, so I was a bit expecting them to be better performed. So when Adelaide ended up smashing us, I left that game feeling quite upset.
Okay. Yep.
So for me, that was the hammer and
the tipping point.
The tipping point that I was a Suns supporter now, not a Crows supporter.
That's awesome.
Yeah, for me, it only took 2 years, but 5 years. I mean, North Melbourne were a really strong team in the early 2010s to 2015.
Yes.
I think they played consecutive prelims and stuff.
Yeah, we did. Yep.
So that would have been easier to hold on to a winning team. Yeah.
It definitely was. Yeah, and I guess this year with the battle for the spoon at Metricon Stadium, I think it's Saturday afternoon. Your old mob against my old mob. It's a lot easier to support the Suns when they're winning and when they're doing better than your former team. So it'd be an interesting game on Saturday. Someone's got to win, so it'll probably be a draw.
All right, so. You've given us a fair insight already into what you've done with the Inside 50 podcast, but are there any memorable moments that stand out working behind the scenes with Suns players or staff?
I'll give them a big tick of approval first and foremost for the professionalism, the preparation that went into it, and the likes of Rhiannon and Sam, staff members that had everything organised, and then I'd just be sitting there waiting for example, David Lake and Fee McLarty to talk about AFLW. Was one of the episodes, one of the podcasts last year, and they got caught up. I know Mark Evans got caught up in was running a bit behind because he had a media conference to do downstairs, and everything ran perfectly well. Just having the unbelievable opportunity to host it and potentially host it again in the future, as they were happy with how it went. Just being part of a little piece of that jigsaw, and I guess because I saw it meant so much more because of the way that it was done, the professionalism of it, as I mentioned, and the passion that everybody had and the direction that everybody was going in together, made it all that more special. It wasn't just something slapped together and let's knock out a little podcast to keep the members happy. It wasn't that at all. It was something that if members listen to it, that's a bonus. If not, well, we're here to do this for a reason. And everybody was on the same page in their message as well. So the overarching thing for me, being a memorable moment, was actually the entire podcast, the entire thing. So obviously,
so you just being the front man in this situation, you're saying the digital team, the media team at the Suns, they were crafting the show. With such love, it was quite impressive.
Yeah, I just had to turn up and I was going to say look pretty. Not even that. It's a podcast like this, so it doesn't matter what. I'm in my dressing gown actually, so don't tell anyone. This isn't on air, is it? No. But having I guess it was such a well-oiled machine, and then once we went to air, the message came across from everybody was just so consistent all the way through, and they were prepared. So they were even prepped on what the actual agenda and what the questions were going to be, and what they were looking to get out of the podcast because of the digital team and the marketing team and dealing with all the different people that I spoke with, obviously, that I had great fun with Stuart Dew. He's an absolute ripper. He's a gentleman. He's extremely passionate, and I'd love to see him be successful and win finals and be a successful coach in the AFL, because I think he's certainly the right man for the job. And having him on the inside 50 was a couple of times for him to give his time up as a senior AFL coach in a very, very difficult season last year, particularly the second time when I think we were 3-16 or something at the time. For him to still come on and be still super positive and still talk about not necessarily the Brendan Bolton green shoots type scenario, but still talk about the direction of the club, the opportunities provided to some of these younger players, the connectivity that is coming. He can see it coming with these guys playing together for only 10, 20, 30 games, the Jack Bowes and the Benny Ainsworths, and just the connection that these guys are starting to have on and off the field. You see it come game day. You can now really see how they're gelling together. And he was saying that in the midst of a significantly long losing streak. And in all fairness, very rarely were we competitive in the last 6 to 8 rounds in particular. And there's maybe one game, I think the Essendon game late last year, where we were pretty close. I think Stringer kicked a goal late to blow us out of the water for maybe winning the game. But outside of that, there were very few games that we were in after probably half time or three-quarter time. So it wasn't like we were losing close and there was good competitive efforts. There were some very, very average efforts, and it had to do with talent on the field as well. And the positivity still coming out of the likes of Stuart Dew and Mark Evans, for that matter, when I spoke with him, was just super, super impressive. And that was memorable to me. That's probably what's rusted me on even more as a foundation member. And I've obviously pledged my family membership for the season and going along on Sunday for the Giants game. And I went to the Bulldogs game last week, and I've been to every game this year so far that has been up here, and loving every minute of it, as you have been too, Shane. And I'm sure that all our listeners have been loving watching the Suns run around. And yeah, just a shame we couldn't get across the line against the Bulldogs and be sitting in the 8 at 5-3. It's just so close, but it'll come. We won't lose those games next year going forward. They're the games that we'll win, no doubt.
Yeah, it was a real disappointment. We'll talk about the Bulldogs game later in the show. But
sure.
What was your favourite Suns win? Talking about all the wins we've seen this year, is there one this year that's impressed you the most as your favourite, or is it something from a couple of years ago?
We seem to go really well against Fremantle. I thought the Fremantle victory this year, and certainly the Fremantle victory last year as well, were awesome. The finish to Carlton last year with Jack Bowes kicking that winner was excitement plus, and certainly being live at the ground, and it was almost out in front of us on the field. We're I think in the fourth row and weren't too far away from the action, and that was bedlam in the crowd. The crowd were going off more than the players, which was just great to see that the passion. So I guess being in and around at a home game in a close, hard-fought, tight win, certainly that we're not expected to win many games, certainly at the beginning of last season. The Carlton Fremantle games stick out in recent memory, beginning of last year. The Fremantle game this year, which I thought Fremantle aren't a bad side. They've pushed pretty much every team that they've played. They've had a couple of I think last night they only kicked a couple of goals, but prior to that they've been very competitive and in pretty much every game all the way through. And that's a sort of game that we would have lost last year, I think, or previous years. So I was really impressed with. We didn't play our best but I was really impressed with the way we fought the game out, and obviously the Adelaide and the West Coast win prior to that. The West Coast game was really was exciting to watch. Obviously, Matt Rowell run around and dominate against a quality midfield, but I did think, and I had heard that West Coast were pretty flat. They'd only just settled in. I just didn't think they were going to be ready, and we were red hot, and that showed. But against the odds wins, that game in Sydney, beating the Sydney Swans down at the SCG when we beat them for the first time, and I think your old mob Adelaide, the win that we had this year against Adelaide, well I think of it, that was finally completed the set. We've now beaten every team in the AFL. Prior to this season, we hadn't beaten Adelaide, and prior to last season, we hadn't beaten the Sydney Swans, I think it was. So that win down at the SCG against the Swans was a fantastic win. Was that last year or the year before?
No, that was 2018, because we still had Stephen May playing for us at that stage.
That's right, yes.
So, speaking of Stephen May, is he your favourite Suns player, or please tell me you've got someone else? I'm sick of Stephen May being our favourite Suns player.
Yeah, well, I guess there's a few over the journey. I had a very close affiliation with Daniel Harris, who was at the Suns in year one and came up from North Melbourne. I'm personally close friends with him. Jager O'Meara, I actually sponsored him in his first 3 seasons. We only got to see him play for one of those 3 seasons, but got to know Jager personally, and he was an absolute ripper, but unfortunately went down to the Hawks for just needed a fresh start. Had so many injuries, just needed a fresh start. So I didn't hold that and begrudge him for that. And he did speak to me about it before he went down. So that was a shame. But Jager was certainly an early favourite. Tom Lynch was my dad's favourite, but right now, let's talk about today. I've got 2. One of them is Benny Ainsworth. I think he is an absolute star. He gives 120%, and he goes at a bull at a gate, and he just loves the club, and a Victorian. And I love the fact that he's embraced the Gold Coast like he has, and he is a Sun through and through, and more recently, joining the club last season, he's now in the leadership group, which is a testament to how he's carried himself. And then he played half a season last year, and that's Sam Collins. I had Sam on the podcast along with
Josh
Corbett. So I had Josh Corbett and Chris Burgess. And Sam Collins I spoke to another time separately, not actually on the podcast. Sorry, I didn't have Sam on the podcast. I had Burjo and Josh, and we were talking about the three of them joined the club at the same time, and they were 3 peas in a pod. And I spoke to Sam 2 or 3 times at Suns events, etc., and got to know him. And he's made a beeline for me every time I've been in the area, and he's come and said g'day, and he's just a cracking young man, and I'll tell you what, he is a footballer and a half. I can't believe Ross Lyon didn't give him a crack at Fremantle more than what he got. He is our number 1 defender, in my opinion, and he showed that against the Bulldogs the other night, that's for sure. He's a star.
Yeah, he is, and that was implemented against the Bulldogs. He was one of our better players. So let's jump into that Bulldogs review.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's do it.
So the Gold Coast Suns, 6 goals, 10-46, were defeated by the Western Bulldogs, 7 goals, 9-51. We went down by a 5-point margin. Sexton kicked 3 goals, but it was a bit of a thriller for a Thursday night. First of all, what was your opinion on the Thursday night? You've got a family membership, so
yes,
you have family that go along to the game. Was it difficult being a school night?
It was a bit of a challenge getting the 9-year-old up, who's in grade 4. He's Jet's 9 years of age, and he struggled to get up Friday morning, and then played footy Sunday morning, and he was still a bit tired. So not ideal. Friday night footy would be fantastic, or a public holiday the next day. But I personally, I'd go to any day of the week, personally, and certainly we've got Wednesday night and Thursday night and Monday night coming up in August. So I'll do my best to get to all of those games. I don't know if the whole family will join me for obvious reasons, being a school night. And I certainly think there's an 8:00 game coming up.
Yeah, next Thursday. I'm actually on the fence about going to that one. I think that's just going to be too late for me.
I'll be there. I'm going to go. I might take my dad. My dad's 84.
Yeah,
he's in. But I don't think that my son will go because that's past his bedtime. So that's a bit of a challenge. But I'm sure I might let him stay up and watch the first quarter. We'll see how he goes. But it's a big ask on a school night to be out and maybe not getting home till 10:30, 11 o'clock. So Thursday night though, the 7 o'clock start. The whole family went. So the Western, get back to the Western Bulldogs game. We absolutely we're in it up to our eyeballs, and the family were there cheering them on, and unfortunately just fell just short. Rankin fell just short in the end with his dominance in the final quarter, and the Suns' dominance in the last 10 minutes. We just couldn't get that goal. We just missed too many chances, unfortunately, but great effort. You cannot fault the effort, and the group is again heading in the right direction, as Stewie Dew does talk about, and I've seen that, I guess, off the field last year, and I'm seeing it on the field this year, which is fantastic.
Yeah, so I thought we won the midfield battle against the Dogs. For most of the night. Took Miller, David Swallow, Jared Witts, Greenwood, even Holman was quite impressive when he did go in there as well. Yes. Against the likes of McRae, Bontempelli, and the other stars in that Dogs midfield, they did really well. I thought that was going to be our Achilles heel for that game. We had 10 more inside 50s than the Dogs, but unfortunately, yes. I think it was that second quarter where we just weren't able to capitalise. And we only got the one goal, I think, from basically an entire quarter being played in our forward half.
Definitely, my head was turned to the right for pretty much the whole game, the whole second quarter, watching the ball in our forward line, and we just, credit to the Bulldogs, their defence was very good. They had very good team defence, but they also chipped in with a number of intercept marks and made it difficult for us to get through and score. But for obvious reasons, not capitalising on that second quarter. I think we should have had maybe a 15-point lead, 20-point lead perhaps, and we went in actually 2 points down at halftime. So that was a shame. And the Bulldogs did make us pay and got a little bit of a gap, couple of goal gap on us in the second half, and we couldn't quite run it down. So
as a coach, what do you think the Suns could have done better to try to capitalise on that, besides actually kicking straight? I mean, the Bulldogs had pretty much flooded our forward 50, and the ball wasn't really going much further than the halfway mark. So yeah. Is there something they could have done better? I was thinking maybe look for players on the run outside 50. So a Lockie Weller comes streaming past. I think it might have been Harbrow took a mark just outside 50, or Hanley, and maybe have Weller come by, grab the ball, and try and have a ping from 55 out.
Yeah, because we did dominate. I guess it comes down to the fact that a lot of scores come from turnover, and the reason for that in the AFL, that is in general, the reason for that, obviously they don't have time to get the numbers back, and it becomes a pure one-on-one. And it was an extremely wet and slippery night as well, so that makes it difficult to bomb it from outside 50 with not having sure footing, or as sure footing as what you would probably like, and also obviously the slipperiness of the ball, your hands, and so on and so forth. So they did try and spot up inside 50. It just came down to delivery. Unfortunately, the delivery, a lot of times I saw us kick it on Sam Day, and in particular Ben King's head, or fractionally over. So maybe is it a leading pattern from the forwards? or is it a skill execution to the forwards that that cost us? We only needed to take a couple of grabs and kick a couple of goals, and it changes dramatically. So close to obviously winning the game, and so close to potentially blowing the Dogs out of the water in the second quarter. And I think with just natural progression of having these guys play as a unit, I mean, bear in mind, how many games has Ben King played now? He played, 10 last year?
He's up to around 18, I think.
There you go.
Yeah.
So he hasn't even played 20 games of footy. Sam Day has been a very, very good link player for us, and obviously Rankin was out of the square most of the night. So, yeah, I guess it probably came down to a little bit of a poor execution. It was a combination of things. One time it was poor execution. The next time it was good defence by the Dogs. Next time it was maybe our forwards leading too early and running under the ball, perhaps, or just, again, it being kicked on the head instead of out in front. So you're right. There could have been some risk taking and having some bombs from outside 50, but I guess if you've got that connection and you can hit someone up 25, 30 metres out right in front or on a slight angle, you're probably going to take that option, and that's probably what they're coached to do as well. So the conditions didn't help. The Bulldogs made it difficult for us, and at times we made it difficult for ourselves. So it was a combination of things, and you look at it and it's a 5-point margin at the end of the day. It's just one straight kick in it, and it just goes to show how close we are. And I'd be surprised if the Bulldogs don't make the top 4 or 6 teams this year. So they're a very, very quality team. And
they are a quality team, and we had every chance to win that game, especially in the last quarter. I mean, this leads into the incredible.
This is incredible!
I mean, Rankin took a beautiful specky in the last quarter with minutes to go, and could have tied the game with that shot, but I guess this is probably the ridiculous part as well. he tried to run around, and he made it a lot more difficult for himself, finishing the game with 1 goal for. So
yes,
he could have single-handedly won that game for us.
Absolutely. I mean, I think he kicked, was it 3-3 in his first game against Melbourne as well, and we went down by just a couple of goals. I think they kicked a goal after the siren to make the margin a bit bigger. And there were some gettable goals for him as well. I think he's kicked 6 goals, 9 in 3 games. So he's absolutely getting some opportunities, and conversion will come. I think will come with a little bit more poise, a little bit more game time under his belt. It was his 3rd game, and if you say that a 3rd game is going to get 5 shots on goal, you'd take that every day of the week, even if you kick 5 points straight. Now, 1-4, if it was 2-3 or ideally 3-2, then we get the win. But not to be. It was, I dare say, if he goes back and has a look at that final kick, I reckon he'd do exactly the same thing again. I reckon he'd snap it around the body. And not go back for a drop punt, particularly in those conditions. I think there's a little bit more wriggle room for error as opposed to a drop punt maybe slipping off the boot, being a wet, slippery ball, particularly late in the game.
Saying that, though, his only goal came from a beautiful drop punt in heavier conditions. It was pouring rain at that stage.
Yes.
And he was about 40 out. I think it was a beautiful kick of the ball as well.
Yes.
So he can certainly do that. He can certainly kick a beautiful drop punt.
100%. His goal against the Sydney Swans in the run the previous week as well was outstanding. So he can execute a drop punt, that's for sure. But maybe his confidence at the time was, I'm close enough here. I'll just snap it around the corner and just bend it around, and just unfortunately just hooked it a fraction too far. There was maybe 2 centimetres in it. He hits the ball 2 centimetres further up, and it doesn't hook as much and go straight through the middle, and we're having a different conversation because we're back in the centre. The scores are level, and we potentially get another centre clearance because we were dominating that last quarter.
Yeah, and the positive from this, like you said, his 5 scoring shots, as he matures and gets more games into him, he's either going to get more scoring shots or become a lot more deadly with his accuracy and win games off the back of his boot. So a lot to look positive to. I mean, like you said, Bulldogs, they're probably going to finish around that top 6 mark. So really impressive what the Suns were able to do. And
100%.
They're definitely in the talking point for playing finals this year. Definitely in consideration in that to try and get into the top 8. Wits was great. He dominated Tim English, which everyone thought would be the matchup to watch.
Tim English has been in great form, and I think it was 46 hit-outs to 14, and broke even within possessions and around the ground. And I watched that closely because Tim English has been in great form, and I think he had something like 200 ranking points the previous week. And Witsy actually took him to school.
Yeah, so Tuke Miller was our best with the ranking points, had 146, and Collins behind him on 121. Those two both played fantastic games, both different types. Miller was sensational in the midfield. He's having a career best year and probably pushing himself up into the A-grade category of midfielders. And Collins is arguably got to be an all-Australian consideration for his work as a centre-half back, full-back, that can intercept as well.
100%, yeah. On my ABC feedback, I gave a 3-2-1 to Miller, and Collins and Wits was my 3-2-1. So you're spot on the money there, Shane. Tuke has been in amazing form, and he's pretty much been in my votes every week. Obviously, Raul going down has put a little bit more responsibility on him to win that clearance, but he was pretty much paired up and matched up against the Bont on a number of occasions at stoppages, and the Bont had about 20 touches, I think, from memory, and Turkey had 26 in the end. And absolutely was, because it's about matchups as well. It's easy to get junk handballs and kicks and what have you, and rack up numbers, particularly late in quarters. And it's who you're, and you particularly when you're not marked or you're not marking someone. But Miller's form is outstanding because he's accountable to the other players. He could have 35 possessions if he was just running around by himself, but his defensive acts are outstanding. And speaking of defenders or defensive acts, in the defender Sam Collins, who we spoke about a bit earlier, Sammy kept Josh Bruce, who in my opinion has been in really good form for the Dogs after switching over from St Kilda. He didn't get a kick, and he didn't even mark it once. He had a handful of, I think he had 7 or 8 handballs when I looked at the stats after the game, but he was kickless, obviously goalless because he didn't kick it and didn't take a mark, whereas Sam Collins basically was on him all night and dominated him, had numerous intercept possessions. I think he had 17 touches in the end himself and a handful of marks and a number of tackles. What was Josh Bruce doing? He was again, he was a bit like Witsy. He was taken absolutely to the cleaners with what he did to Tim English, Witsy. But Collins taught Josh Bruce a lesson. It wasn't a night for forwards, but I'll tell you what, Sam not only beat him, he absolutely dominated him, and he's undoubtedly has to be in the conversation. He'd be going past the likes of, I know Robbie Tarrant has been spoken about, McGovern, Jeremy McGovern's always in the conversation, but Sam Collins is right up there in consideration for key centre half backs in the competition, and he'd be shading the likes of Hurley and from the Bombers, and certainly Alex Keith from the Bulldogs, who we played against the other night. He'd be well and truly up the order ahead of them for sure.
Yeah, he would. All right, unfortunately that does us for time tonight, Jason, but thank you very much for joining me on the show tonight.
Shane, it's been an absolute pleasure, mate. Thank you so much for having me on, and looking forward to a victory against the Giants on Sunday afternoon. Metricon at 3:30, I think it is, and game on. It's a massive game for the club, and it's anyone's game, but fingers crossed we can get across the line.
Okay, well, until next week, go Suns.
Go the Sunnies.